Before the world knew Clint Eastwood as Hollywood's greatest cowboy, he was already living like one in complete secrecy. This is the story of the hidden ranch where cinema's toughest star chooses solitude over fame. This isn't Hollywood, this is real life. Clint Eastwood's words echoed across his 22,000-acre ranch in Carmel Valley as he guided his horse through the morning mist. It was 5:30 a.m., and while most of Hollywood was still sleeping off last night's parties, Clint was already 2 hours into his daily routine of feeding cattle, checking fence lines, and living the life that most actors only pretended to know. No cameras, no scripts, no director yelling action, just a man, his land, and the kind of authentic existence that money can't buy, but celebrity can easily destroy. This was 1986, and Clint Eastwood had just made a decision that would shock Hollywood. He was disappearing into the mountains of California to live like the cowboys he'd spent decades portraying on screen. By 1985, Clint Eastwood was drowning in his own success. The constant demands of being Hollywood's most bankable star were suffocating the very qualities that had made him legendary. Every morning brought a new stack of scripts, each one promising to make him richer, but none offering the authenticity that had drawn him to acting in the first place. His Malibu home, once a sanctuary, had become a fortress under siege from paparazzi, fans, and industry hangers-on who wanted pieces of the Clint Eastwood mystique. The breaking point came during a particularly grueling press tour for Pale Rider. Sitting in yet another sterile hotel suite, answering the same questions about his tough guy persona for the 100th time, Clint realized he was becoming a caricature of himself. The interviewers didn't want to know about his directing ambitions, his passion for jazz, or his philosophy on life. They wanted sound bites about squinting and shooting bad guys. "I felt like I was suffocating," he would later tell a close friend. "I was playing Clint Eastwood playing a cowboy instead of just being myself." That night, alone in his hotel room overlooking the glittering lights of Los Angeles, Clint made a decision that would reshape his life. He called his financial advisor and said 6 words that would change everything. "Find me land, lots of it, now." He didn't want a vacation home or an investment property. He wanted an escape route from the artificial world that was slowly consuming his soul. The search took 3 months. Real estate agents showed him properties in Montana, Wyoming, and Colorado, all beautiful, but somehow not quite right. Then his advisor called about a piece of land that might be too isolated, 22,000 acres in the mountains above Carmel Valley, California. The property was so remote that it took 2 hours of driving on increasingly rough roads just to reach the main house. There were no neighbors for miles, no cell phone towers, and certainly no paparazzi. The previous owner had been a reclusive millionaire who'd used it as a private hunting preserve. Clint drove up to see it on a foggy morning in October 1985. As he stood on a ridge overlooking the vast expanse of rolling hills, oak trees, and untouched wilderness, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years: peace. "This is it," he said to the nervous real estate agent who'd been apologizing for the property's remoteness. "This is exactly what I need." Within a week, he'd made an offer that was accepted immediately. The seller, perhaps recognizing a kindred spirit seeking solitude, didn't even try to negotiate. Clint Eastwood had found his sanctuary. The transformation of Clint Eastwood from Hollywood icon to working rancher didn't happen overnight. It began with a single symbolic act. The day after closing on the property, he drove up to the ranch not in his usual luxury car, but in a battered Ford pickup truck he'd bought specifically for the occasion. No driver, no entourage, no assistants, just Clint, a thermos of coffee, and a determination to build something real with his own hands. The ranch came with basic infrastructure: a modest main house, a few outbuildings, and miles of fence that hadn't been properly maintained in years. Rather than hiring contractors to renovate everything to Hollywood standards, Clint decided to do most of the work himself. "I wanted to earn this place," he explained to his longtime friend and frequent collaborator, producer Fritz Manis. "I didn't want to just buy it and decorate it, I wanted to sweat for it." His first project was rebuilding the horse stable. Despite having ridden horses in dozens of films, Clint quickly discovered there was a vast difference between movie horsemanship and the real thing. The horses he purchased, not trained movie horses but working ranch animals, could sense his inexperience immediately. They tested him constantly, refusing commands, testing his patience, and occasionally depositing him unceremoniously in the dirt when he got too confident. The lessons were humbling but necessary. Old Pete Martinez, a local cowboy who'd agreed to help Clint get started, became his unofficial mentor. "Mr. Eastwood," Pete said after watching Clint struggle with a particularly stubborn mare, "in the movies, the horse knows it's just pretend. Out here, they know when you mean business and when you're just playing dress-up." The comment stung because it was true, but it also motivated Clint to work harder. Every weekend, and increasingly during weekdays between film projects, Clint immersed himself in ranch life. He learned to repair fence lines, treat sick cattle, and read weather patterns that could mean the difference between a successful season and financial disaster. His hands, once pampered and protected for close-up shots, became calloused and scarred from real work. His back ached from hauling hay bales and fixing equipment. But for the first time in years, he felt genuinely alive. The Hollywood press initially treated his ranch purchase as another celebrity eccentricity, assuming he'd grow bored and sell within a year. What they didn't understand was that Clint wasn't playing at being a rancher. He was becoming one. The ranch wasn't a hobby or a tax write-off. It was his salvation, a place where he could remember who he was beneath all the fame and expectation. By 1987, Clint Eastwood had established something unprecedented in Hollywood, a working ranch where celebrity status meant absolutely nothing. The unwritten rules he instituted were simple but uncompromising. Everyone worked, everyone pulled their weight, and reputation was earned through actions, not accolades. These weren't just guidelines. They were the foundation of a community that valued authenticity above all else. The first test of these principles came when a famous director friend visited the ranch expecting the usual celebrity hospitality. Instead of being served by staff, he was handed work gloves and told to help mend a section of damaged fence. "But I'm here to relax," the director protested. Clint's response became legendary among ranch hands. "Relaxation is earned. We'll relax tonight after the work's done." The director left early, but word spread throughout Hollywood about Clint's unusual approach to hospitality. The ranch operated on what Clint called the Cowboy Code, principles that governed behavior regardless of someone's fame or fortune. A handshake deal was binding, your word was your bond, and you helped your neighbors without expecting anything in return. When the Johnson family, who owned the adjacent property, lost their barn to a fire, Clint organized a barn raising that brought together every rancher in the valley. He worked alongside his neighbors, not as the famous Clint Eastwood, but as just another pair of hands willing to help. The daily routine was sacred and unchanging. Dawn brought feeding time for the horses and cattle, followed by equipment maintenance and fence repairs. Lunch was simple fare prepared by whoever was available, often Clint himself, who had become surprisingly skilled at cooking hearty meals for working men. Afternoons were for the harder work, branding cattle, breaking horses, or tackling major construction projects. Evenings were spent around a campfire, sharing stories and planning the next day's work. What surprised many visitors was how naturally Clint had adapted to this lifestyle. Gone was the urbane sophistication of Hollywood premieres, replaced by the practical wisdom of a man who understood his land and animals. He could spot a lame horse from 50 yards away, predict weather changes by reading cloud formations, and negotiate cattle prices with the shrewdness of someone who'd grown up in the business. The transformation was so complete that local ranchers began forgetting they were dealing with a movie star. "Clint's just Clint," explained neighbor Bob Thompson. "He shows up when he says he will, works as hard as anyone, and doesn't put on airs. That's all that matters out here." It was perhaps the greatest compliment Clint Eastwood had ever received, to be judged not by his fame, but by his character. The defining moment of Clint Eastwood's ranch life came in the summer of 1989, when he faced a choice that would determine whether his commitment to authentic living was genuine or merely another Hollywood affectation. A major studio had offered him a 3-picture deal worth more than any contract in his career, but filming would require him to be away from the ranch for 8 months straight during the critical calving season. The offer came at a time when the ranch was struggling financially. A harsh winter had depleted feed supplies, veterinary bills were mounting, and several prize cattle had been lost to disease. The smart business decision was obvious. Take the Hollywood money and use it to stabilize the ranch operations. But Clint found himself wrestling with a deeper question. Was he a rancher who occasionally made movies, or a movie star who played at ranching? The answer came during a pre-dawn check of the cattle, when Clint discovered a cow in difficult labor. Alone except for his border collie Jake and miles from the nearest veterinarian, Clint spent 6 hours assisting the birth of twin calves. It was exhausting, messy work that required patience, skill, and genuine care for the animal's welfare. When both calves were finally safe and nursing, Clint sat exhausted in the dirt, covered in mud and birth fluids, and realized he'd never felt more accomplished. That afternoon, he called his agent and turned down the multi-million-dollar deal. "I can't leave during calving season," he explained, knowing the agent would think he'd lost his mind. "These animals depend on me," the agent argued, pleaded, and finally hung up in frustration. Within hours, word had spread throughout Hollywood that Clint Eastwood had chosen cattle over cash, authenticity over advancement. The decision had consequences beyond money. Several industry relationships cooled, and some executives began viewing Clint as unreliable. But on the ranch, the decision earned him something far more valuable than Hollywood approval: the respect of men who measured worth by integrity rather than income. Old Pete Martinez, now in his 70s and increasingly dependent on Clint's support, summed up the local sentiment. "That's when we knew he was really one of us. A real cowboy doesn't abandon his herd for fool's gold." The calving season was successful, with minimal losses and healthy newborns that would strengthen the ranch's breeding program for years to come. More importantly, Clint had passed his own test. He wasn't playing at being authentic. He had chosen authenticity over everything else that had once seemed important. The ranch wasn't his escape from real life. It had become his real life. 40 years later, the Mission Ranch continues to operate according to the principles Clint Eastwood established in those early pioneering days. The same commitment to hard work, authentic relationships, and respect for the land governs every aspect of life on the property. What began as one man's escape from Hollywood artificiality has evolved into a living testament to values that many feared were disappearing from American life. The ranch has become a place of pilgrimage for those seeking to understand what authentic living actually means. Visitors come expecting to find a celebrity playground and instead discover a working operation where every person, regardless of their background, contributes meaningfully to the community. The horses still need feeding at dawn, the fences still require constant maintenance, and the cattle still operate on nature's schedule rather than Hollywood's convenience. Clint, now in his 90s, remains actively involved in ranch operations, though he's gradually transitioned much of the day-to-day management to longtime employees who share his vision. "This place taught me that authenticity isn't something you can act," he reflects. "It's something you have to live every single day, whether anyone's watching or not." The ranch hands who work alongside him speak of a man who leads by example, never asking anyone to do work he wouldn't do himself. The influence of ranch life has permeated every aspect of Clint's later career. The patience required to work with livestock translates into the calm authority he brings to directing. The ability to read weather and animal behavior has sharpened his instincts about human nature and storytelling. Films like Unforgiven and $1 Million Baby carry the weight of someone who has learned that real strength comes from understanding your limitations and working within them. Perhaps most significantly, the ranch has provided Clint with something that Hollywood success never could: a sense of place and purpose that exists independently of public approval. "I don't need reviews or box office numbers to know if I've had a good day," he says. "If the cattle are healthy, the horses are content, and the land is well cared for, that's success." The Mission Ranch stands as proof that in an increasingly artificial world, authentic living remains possible for those willing to commit to it fully. It's not about rejecting modernity or retreating from responsibility. It's about choosing depth over surface, substance over style, and genuine relationships over transactional ones. In choosing the ranch over Hollywood glamour, Clint Eastwood didn't diminish his legacy. He completed it, proving that the toughest role any actor can play is simply being themselves. Today, when young actors and directors visit Clint Eastwood at the Mission Ranch, they often expect to find a retired legend, reminiscing about past glories. Instead, they encounter a man whose greatest achievement may be the life he built away from the cameras, a life that taught him the difference between being famous and being authentic. The ranch that began as an escape has become something far more significant, a masterclass in what it means to live according to your values rather than your circumstances. Every morning for nearly 4 decades, Clint has awakened not to the artificial urgency of Hollywood deadlines, but to the genuine rhythms of land and livestock that have sustained human communities for millennia. The lessons learned in these hills have influenced every aspect of his later career. The discipline required to maintain a working ranch has translated into the focused intensity he brings to filmmaking. The patience necessary to work with animals has informed his approach to directing actors. Most importantly, the humility enforced by daily contact with forces beyond his control has kept him grounded in an industry notorious for inflating egos beyond all proportion. "The ranch saved me from becoming a caricature of myself," Clint has said. "It reminded me that beneath the celebrity, beneath the roles, beneath all the Hollywood machinery, I'm just a man who has to earn his place in the world like everyone else." This understanding has made his later films more profound, his directing more authentic, and his life more meaningful than any amount of fame or fortune could have achieved. The Mission Ranch continues to operate as both a working cattle operation and a sanctuary for authentic living. It has hosted weddings for ranch hands, served as a refuge for friends seeking peace from their own busy lives, and provided a model for sustainable agriculture that respects both tradition and innovation. The values Clint established, hard work, integrity, respect for the land, and genuine community, remain as relevant today as they were when he first drove up that winding mountain road in 1985. For Clint Eastwood, the greatest role he ever played wasn't the man with no name or Dirty Harry. It was himself, stripped of pretense and artifice, learning to live authentically in a world that often rewards the opposite. The ranch stands as his most enduring creation, proof that real success isn't measured in box office receipts or awards, but in the ability to remain true to yourself regardless of external pressures. In the end, Clint Eastwood's secret ranch reveals the most important secret of all. Authenticity isn't something you find, it's something you choose every single day, one honest action at a time. Have you ever felt the need to escape from artificial expectations to find your authentic self? Share your story in the comments below.
Don't forget to hit the like button if you like the video and subscribe if you want videos like this to come. See you in the next story.